This week, I'm sharing my conversation with Nirrimi Firebrace. Nirrimi is an award-winning photographer based out of Australia. She's also a writer, and she catapulted into the public eye when she was just a teenager because of the unique way that she shares her story through photos and words online. Nirrimi runs a popular blog called Fire and Joy, where she shares both heartbreaking and beautiful stories of her life. And as a photographer, she shot for Netflix, American Apparel, the band First Aid Kit, and actress Zelda Williams. This episode actually originally aired in July of 2016, but we were originally scheduled to have this conversation months earlier. I was in Australia on the Sunshine Coast for a speaking gig, and Nirrimi and I had made plans for me to visit her home just an hour or so drive from where my gig was. We'd met once while speaking at another conference in the US, and I feel like we really quickly hit it off. And while I was actually still on my flight over to Australia, Nirrimi got word that her brother had died by suicide. We canceled plans to see each other so that she could be with her family for the funeral. And through Instagram and her blog, I watched as Nirrimi processed and grieved the loss of her brother very publicly. It was both heartbreaking but also beautiful, the way that she let people into that. And I also watched as she shared that she didn't have many photos of her and her brother together, and she wished that she'd had more photos taken of the two of them. She couldn't turn back the clock, but she could help others who didn't have photos with their loved ones. So even in the midst of her grieving, she posted on Instagram that she wanted to shoot portraits of people and the people that they loved. And she did. I love the way that a part of her grieving process involved helping others. Nirrimi and I had the opportunity to talk over the internet a few months later, and that's the episode that you're going to hear today. I am Brandon Harvey, and this is Sounds Good. This is the weekly podcast where we have conversations with inspiring people who are rejecting cynicism and using their lives to make an impact. Sounds Good is not your typical 3 Steps to Success podcast. We don't host this podcast for the sake of leaving you with bullet points on self-improvement. We deeply believe that our lives are more complex than that. And so we show up here on Sounds Good to ask big questions, dive into nuance, and learn from each other's stories. This was such a great episode, so without any further ado, let's just jump straight into this. All right, I am on the line with my amazing friend Nirrimi. I'm so excited to have her on Sounds Good. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks. I'm pretty excited and a little bit nervous as well because I don't usually say yes to doing spoken interviews, so hopefully I'm not too awkward.
No, you sound amazing, and I'm super honored to have you on the show. So you and I met, how long, what do you think, like 9 months ago?
Yeah, something like that.
We met.
It feels like a long time.
I know, it feels like we connected pretty instantly.
Yeah.
But you and I met in the mountains of North Carolina. We actually met with Mira, who's been on the show before. So we met in North Carolina, but you live in Australia, and that's where you're calling from today. And that's what makes our friendship even more fun and interesting, is that we live on totally opposite sides of the world.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. I think we probably both have a lot of friendships like that, being travelers.
Exactly. I think that was one of my first things that fascinated me about you, was that you're a traveler. You're always just kind of on the go, and maybe not even that you're always on the go. It's that you have a heart that's ready to be on the go. You're ready to kind of pick up and have some adventures, and you've had a lot of adventures in your short number of years you've been alive, and I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I definitely chase new experiences. I feel like when I'm in one place for too long, I definitely feel ready for something new.
I want to just jump back and start kind of early on in your story, because when I see you, I see somebody who's just an artist. You, at your purest form, you are an artist, and I know that you started creating art as a child, and so I want to just start by asking you, what first compelled you to begin creating art, sharing art when you were just a little kid?
I think for me, I've always been creating from before I could even put my finger on when, like since I can remember. But when I was growing up, I had quite like a rough childhood. My stepfather was abusive, and I was sexually abused and physically abused. And I suppose creating for me was like this escape from all of that. So mostly in the beginning it was writing. I would write and create these worlds where I could sort of escape, like fantasy worlds. And I found that was like really powerful for just, I don't know, finding some peace in days that were really chaotic and scary. And yeah, I don't know, it was kind of like my safe place.
Yeah. And so you started by writing. Were you just writing in journals? Were you writing... What was the form that your writing was taking?
Yeah, I mean, I've always kept journals, but I also wrote books, so chapter books, even like really young. Like I remember being in grade 3, and every week the teacher would read from a chapter book to the class. And I remember one day putting my hand up and asking the teacher if maybe next week I could read one of the chapters from my books. And after that, for the whole year, I used to read a chapter a week in my class. And I remember them just like, sitting at the edge of their seats, just listening for every word. And it was like the best feeling for me. It was really special.
That's incredible. Did you have like other people in your lives that modeled creativity or writing for you? Or was it just kind of a natural thing as a child? Or was there some inspiration behind that being your coping mechanism in a lot of ways?
Both of my parents are creatives. My dad doesn't and has never lived with us, so I knew of him from afar and sort of idolized him a little bit. But I grew up in a town where there definitely wasn't many creatives. I didn't have any real role models or anyone around me sort of writing or photographing or anything. I don't know. I feel like it was very innate and maybe just it was in my blood sort of thing,
Yeah. And your dad, if I remember correctly, your dad is like a notable figure in the UK. Is that right?
Yeah. He's an Aboriginal storyteller. He travels a lot with what he does. Yeah.
And Vice named him the happiest man on earth. Is that true?
Yeah. He's pretty. He's very unique. A very unique person.
That's fascinating. So you've never lived with him. Have you spent much time with it? Because in a lot of ways, I would describe you as a hopeful, joyful person. And I've never met your dad, but I read that Vice article.
Yeah.
And so I would, again, maybe that's just something in your blood. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's almost, I'd spent a bit of time with him growing up. He'd fly me out to a country and we'd spend time together. But I think it almost is like that separation where it's easier to sort of idolize somebody and sort of really look up to them if you're not constantly with them. I don't know. It's something like that I knew I wanted to be like him. His life seemed so exciting, and I don't know, every time I spoke to him, I sort of his words really sunk in for me. He's just, every time I talk to him, he's full of a lot of wisdom, and it's just constant with him. You can't turn it off.
Yeah. But your mom was the one that you kind of grew up with and were raised with.
Yeah.
And tell me a little bit more about your childhood. I know you had a rough childhood, but something that you told me was that you were in a gang at one point. Though that's not a great situation at all, it is everybody's listening to the podcast. They're going to have to go and see your face, BrandonHarvey.com/sounds good, because you have the cutest, sweetest face that I would never imagine in a gang.
Yeah, I beat some people up. No, really, I did.
Oh, no.
I kind of like
How old were you?
Maybe 12. Yeah, 12. Yeah, because 13 is when I picked up a camera. So, I was 12 and, I don't know, I was just the one white girl in this gang, and I don't know, it was a bit fun. I grew up in quite
gosh.
I don't know, a troubled area. Our school had 2 policemen who were constantly there.
Oh, wow. And that's a big deal for Australia. In the States, we have policemen at most of our schools.
Yeah, it's not normal in Australia. It's definitely not normal. It's probably not a good sign.
No. Okay. And so you were in a gang, you were writing and coping, and at some point you made this transition into photography. You said that was at the age of 13, joined the gang at 12. Tell me about the jump into photography.
My mum was making jewelry at the time and selling it online, and she had just this little point and shoot camera that she was using to take photos. And I remember one day just picking it up and snapping some photos of my little sister Pixie in our backyard. And afterwards, my mum was uploading the photos to her computer, and she saw the photos I'd taken, and she was like, "Nirrimi, did you take these?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And she's like, "These are amazing. Like, what are you doing? Like, you need to put these like up somewhere." And so I started just photographing kind of every day, every single day. I actually broke 2 of her cameras shooting in like bad situations, like in the rain and at the beach.
Always worth it.
Yeah. I mean, not great, but it wasn't until I was, I think it was my 15th birthday that I got a real camera. And for me, that was like a massive deal because my mum, you know, she was a single mum with 3 kids and she didn't have like a proper job. So she saved for a long time for that camera for me. And I remember getting it and holding it in my hands and just crying because like I just knew what that camera meant for me. It was like a life changer. Yeah. I slept with that camera beside my pillow every night.
I would imagine that it really meant a lot to your mom that gift that she worked so hard to save up for and gave to you not only meant a lot to you then, but had a significant impact on you for years and years and years to come.
Yeah, I think that would have been really special for her to be able to help me on my path so much, and especially like seeing what ended up happening with that camera and the adventures it went on. Yeah. I think it was really special to both of us.
What do you think was the first big shoot you remember doing with that camera after you got it? Like what was like the next step for you?
We think. I remember, so the first paid job that I got with that camera when I was 15 was shooting for strippers, actually.
No way.
They didn't make it out like they were strippers. They sent me an email. They'd seen my photographs online, and they just said they were like a promotions agency or something. And they asked me to come in and take some photos of the girls. And when I came in as a 15-year-old, there was just all these women like in like lingerie parading around. And I mean, I shot all these topless women on the beach and got paid for it. So
your life is so weird. You have the most bizarre set of adventures that I've ever heard.
Yeah.
I would say like you should make a children's book out of all these adventures, but maybe leave that one out of it.
Yeah, I think that's a lot to leave out of it if I make a children's book.
Oh my gosh. Okay, and so what came next in your story?
So I think what was like really the big spark for me, well, first of all is when I left home at 16, so I quit school because actually I'll backtrack on that a little bit. When I was at school, I was super passionate about photography. Like I knew that this is what I want to do. And I told everyone it, and I didn't have a lot of support at school. In fact, like when I talked about photography, people like very obviously tuned out and would probably rather gossip about people or talk about just about anything else. But I was really passionate about it, and I remember being sent to the career counselor and the lady sitting down with me and saying, "So what do you want to do?" And I said, photography, like I want to travel the world as a photographer, you know, really enthusiastically. And she was just like, "Okay, so these are the uni courses you need to do." And it was like not long after that I just quit school. I was like, that is not the way I want to reach my dream. So
I got started with photography maybe a few years after you. I started shooting professionally when I was like 15 or 16.
Nice.
And I definitely was going to finish high school. I feel like is it common to not finish high school in Australia if you don't want to, or are you like a total outlier?
I think some people do, but they usually have like a trade that they go into. With me, gotcha. I was just kind of just like, I don't know. I think intuition has been like a massive part of like my journey and like the way I live. Is like, I thought, you know what, like I feel like this is the right thing to do, so why not? I'm just going to do it. And that's just what I've always done.
I like that. I like that you did that. And it ended up working out because pretty soon, is that when you got flown to New York for your big shoot? How old were you when that happened?
Yeah, I was 16. I got signed to an agency. Before I got signed to an agency, I won this big award in Australia for photography. And after that, I had about 4 different agencies email me or call me saying they wanted to sign me, and I got to choose. And then after that, Diesel flew me to New York and I shot a campaign for them, which was mental.
That's unbelievable. And had you ever like flown that far before? Was that a big deal? Or at that point were you just kind of like, oh, no big deal, like this is just who I am, I'm a 16-year-old pro photographer?
Okay, so it was a massive deal. Because okay, I came from like this quite a small town where we had no money, and then here I am flying to New York City, being picked up by a limo, going to this 5-star hotel in the middle of New York to shoot. But at the same time, like, I think back on this and I think, how was I not like supremely nervous? Because like, it sounds crazy, like, you know, I had like 20 people in my team, you know, my assistant had an assistant, and I think like, how was I not nervous? But I was just so confident in myself. I had so much confidence. I just knew like, I'm going to nail this. Like, I remember the first model, like the first day I was shooting, and the model like just looked at the other model and was just like, who is this kid? Like, they thought it was a joke. Like everyone was just laughing about it. And actually trying to get them to actually listen to me was kind of hard. But I got there. I don't know. It was just a bit funny. I think I found it all a bit funny.
Where do you think that confidence came from?
I think I've been quite confident since I was a kid in what I do, and I don't know. I think also a big part of it was when I started sharing my photos online, I got like quite a following quite quickly, and people were very supportive on the internet. Even though at school I didn't have any support, I could just, you know, escape onto my online world and find like a crowd of people just saying, hey, you're awesome, I love what you're doing, keep doing it. So I think that really helped me build up my confidence and had like a huge part in me being able to do the things that I did.
Yeah, let's dig into that idea for a minute, because I would imagine that a lot of the people listening are people who are coming over from my Snapchat. They're maybe in high school. They're where we were at when we got started with our little professional photography careers. Because I did the exact same thing, and I actually didn't realize that you and I mean, I guess I see it now, but I started a blog around that age. My blog never got as popular as yours. Yours is nuts. But I also like got really focused on Twitter and got really focused on Flickr, and I was sharing my stuff online. And I lived in this small little town, and it was great. Like, it was awesome. But because it was so small, I didn't have a lot of people who were super similar to me. You know, like, I had friends. I loved the people I went to school with and who were in my town. But I started really connecting with people who were doing really similar stuff all over the world. So I could still name them. There's like 4 photographers who were like 16 or 17 who were all shooting professionally, like all across the United States. And we all kept in touch, and we all still do keep in touch. And that was a huge game changer, to have this support outside of my like immediate social sphere of people who like totally got me. And it sounds like that's what your story was too.
Yeah. It's like I went from feeling totally alone in this obsession and passion to finding other people like me and feeling like, hey, this is not a weird thing. This is not a bad thing. Like, other people feel like I do. And yeah, it was really nice.
Yeah. And so this whole time that you were becoming a more and more impressive professional photographer, you're also developing an audience online. You're sharing stuff on your blog.
Yeah.
You're not just sharing your images, you're sharing your story. And that's something that, I mean, of all of the things about you, actually, I think that's maybe one of the things I admire most, or first admired most about you, is the way that you're able to be so genuine and real and raw and authentic when you share your story with a lot of people, because that's scary, and that does not come naturally. But you have years and years of practice at this. And was it hard at the beginning? Was it ever hard? Is it hard now?
I'd say it's always hard, but I feel like it's kind of like a muscle that I've developed over time. I think I think it is very, very hard being vulnerable anyway, whether it's to one person or to a million people, you know?
Yeah.
So like, I think at the beginning, I think it was definitely something I built up on. In the beginning, I was more vague. I don't know, I was more like in my ego, you know, like with what I was doing, trying to present like the best parts of myself, as like a lot of people do online. But then the more I sort of communicated about the harder parts of myself and the harder parts of life, the more I realized that had a more profound impact on people than my life is so good, I'm so happy, you know, like that's the stuff that was really powerful. And I think also, obviously, the more I shared about the hard stuff, the more like hate I got as well. So I got people just tearing apart a lot of things about my life and starting websites and, you know, that sort of thing, which was really, really hard. But at the same time, the good stuff just outweighed it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, what you got were you got stronger feelings when you shared these more raw emotions.
Yeah.
And some of those strong feelings manifested themselves as hate, which is awful and terrible. But then I would imagine that the people who connected with you connected in such a deeper and more profound way. And that's so much more important than a million lukewarm people in your audience.
It's true.
You'd much rather have just a handful of people who fully get you and who are truly being impacted by what you share.
Well, I think that's the thing about like being really authentic and really yourself, is that you are going to bring in the people who are really going to connect with you. You know, like I could be just likable and I could bring in a bunch of people who kind of like me, but by being like fully myself, and that's, you know, a very flawed person, which I am and everyone is, I bring in people who are just, I don't know, just connect with me so much deeper, and it's so much more fulfilling.
You mentioned about sharing like the beautiful moments of your life.
Yeah.
And so I want to talk for a minute about your amazing daughter, Alba. I just got to catch a little glimpse of her on FaceTime. And then the other day you posted this beautiful, oh my gosh, I got goosebumps watching a beautiful video of little moments with her over the last few months. Tell me about your pregnancy with her and having her and all the joy that brought.
Okay, so I actually had Alba when I was 19, which seems really young, and people always say like, oh, why didn't you wait? But for me, like, that was waiting a long time, because since I even started photography, I've wanted to be a mother. So having her was, it was just like a bit of a fairy tale in a way.
What was the pregnancy like? I know that you've talked a lot about how much you enjoyed that experience.
When I was pregnant, we were living in this, like, me and her father were living in this beautiful little cabin in the Blue Mountains. So it was very idyllic. And I was also traveling. So I was doing a campaign for Billabong across Europe at the time. And then I was shooting for Sony in New Zealand and traveling. So yeah, it was like a lot of travel when I was pregnant, which was kind of fun.
Wow.
And luckily I didn't have like really any, bad symptoms. So it was just kind of like a big adventure until I got home and gave birth to her in our home in the mountains. And yeah, it's a bit of a hazy memory now. I feel like there's probably a lot more like harder moments, like vomiting or like sickness and stuff, that I just can't remember, because like just time does that for me. Like I tend to really remember and romanticize the past. And that's something good to remember too, because I constantly think back to like my partner now. I think, oh, man, I miss when we first got together. Everything was like fireworks and beautiful. And then I think, hold on a minute. In like a couple of years' time, I'm going to be thinking of like right now and thinking like how beautiful this is. That's why I need to be right here enjoying this, you know?
Yeah, that's true. I think that's beautiful. And so you had Alba, and it seems like she's just full of like joy and personality. Do you feel like that's true? Like as she's gotten older, have you gotten to know her personality more and more?
Yeah, definitely. She is full of joy, and she's just full of everything, like including all the hard stuff, like full of anger and wildness and frustration and creativity and excitement. Like everything is just full blast.
Oh.
Yeah, which is like what it is with me, but she's 4, so she's like still figuring out like how do I process these emotions, and it's just a roller coaster.
Okay, and so you had Alba when you were 19. And how old is she again now?
She's 4.
She's 4. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
What are some of the amazing highlights of the last 4 years?
Jeez, that's a big question.
I know. I'm so sorry.
Ooh. Sometimes it's really quite unexpected things. It's not like what you would imagine, like maybe her first steps or the first time she says I love you or says mama, or you know, it's really little moments. Like the other night when she woke up in the middle of the night and I stirred and woke up as well, and she just looked over to me, and there's like a little candle next to our bed, and I could see her little eyes looking at me wide open, and she was just like, I love you, mama, just like that in the middle of the night.
Oh.
Like what made her wake up and just look at me and say that? Like, I don't know, it was just really beautiful. Like she's very like spontaneously loving and affectionate. But highlights of the last 4 years. I mean, we've done a lot of traveling together, and I remember one day she came home from being with her papa, and she just tied up a bow in her shoe. She was maybe 2. And I remember just being so shocked by that. Like, how can a 2-year-old tie a bow? Oh, I remember a really special moment when I think she was 1, and I was cracking eggs to make something, and she wanted to crack the eggs as well. And I thought, oh, okay, this is going to be really messy, but I'll let you do it. She cracked 3 eggs in a row perfectly with no shell. I remember just crying because it seems so crazy. I don't know. It's just, yeah. And also at the moment she keeps singing these beautiful songs. She just makes them up on the spot, and they're so hilarious. Like we drive in the car and she just sits in the back seat just singing, and we just listen and try not to crack up because we don't want to interrupt her and make her stop. So we just listen to her songs, and they're so great.
That's so amazing. That's beautiful. So this whole experience of having a child and raising her and making a move across Australia and continuing to do this traveling and shooting photos and living this interesting life. You've been sharing all of this. And in a lot of ways, you're a blogger, you're a mother, you're a photographer, you're a writer. How would you describe your core identity to yourself? Like, what would you say is the truest thing about you, and the thing that almost is like, this is who I am? Like, yeah, what is that for you?
I really like this question because when I started photography, my identity was photographer. It was just so firmly photographer. Like, that's just who I was. And then as I grew up, and especially after I had Alba, and then it was obviously mother for a while as well, I don't know, like, identity is something that I've spent a lot of time thinking about. I don't know. I think, yes. Well, I think my identity is probably very similar to yours, and I would say storyteller. Definitely. It's definitely photography. I mean, it is a part of storytelling, but now it's so much more than that. And it's even more than the writing. It's more than the photography. It's about the connection to other people. It's about being able to impact on other people in a positive way. And I think storyteller kind of encompasses that.
Isn't it interesting how, like, because I did the exact same thing. I started off being like, I am this thing. Not even that. I was like, I shoot these particular kind of photos. And as I've grown, and good marketing would always say, like, oh, you got to be really specific. Like, Coca-Cola's thing is just like, we are a company that sells you sugar water, and we associate ourselves with happiness, and they'll never change that. And so, like, and I went to school for marketing and advertising, and, like, traditional school would say, okay, you just got to find your niche and do that thing. But I know for me, like, I can't do that at all. My passions have changed so much. And now, sure, I'm a photographer still, but, of course, I've got that phrase, I'm a storyteller. And specifically, it's like, what kind of stories do I want to tell? I want to tell stories of the good in the world, and I want to tell stories of the beauty in the heartbreak. And it's become more wide and narrow, and it's evolving and changing. And it's actually really encouraging to hear that that's been true for you too, because I think you're doing it marvelously.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I think not putting yourself into a box or following too many rules. I just kind of, I don't know, I am. And especially like right now I'm experimenting with so many different things. Like I'm really into cooking. Like I'm writing this little cookbook. Aww. And I'm into making music. I started recording my songs and, like directing as well. Like I'm into so many different things now that it's hard to like really label myself as anything. But that's fun. I like that. But I will admit that it was much easier when I was just a photographer to get a lot done, Yeah,
that's the thing where it's some give and take. It's a trade between like passion and efficiency in some ways. Like I could be a really efficient wedding photographer. Like if that's all that I did, if all I did was some specific thing, I feel like I could just own it.
Totally.
But it's I don't have the passion for that in the way that I probably did at one point. And I think that's okay.
Yeah, I feel that.
I just wanted to take a quick break from this conversation to tell you about the sponsor of this week's episode of Sounds Good, Schmidt's Naturals. Now, Schmidt's Naturals is on a mission to change the way you think about natural. They make deodorant, toothpaste, and soap, and their newest deodorant stick is amazing. Let me tell you about it. So Schmidt's partnered with the Jane Goodall Institute to create Lily of the Valley, a special edition deodorant inspired by one of Dr. Jane Goodall's favorite floral aromas. Jane Goodall came to my hometown when I was in the 7th grade, and I have loved her ever since. She spoke. She was just delightful. And so the amazing thing is that 5% of every Lily of the Valley purchase will benefit the Jane Goodall Institute's efforts to protect animals and conserve the environment. And oh my gosh, it actually smells so good. Jane apparently has amazing taste. And so here's what's cool. For listeners of Sounds Good, Schmidt's is offering free shipping when you use the code GOOD at schmittsnaturals.com. Just go to schmittsnaturals.com today and use our special code GOOD to get free shipping and help support this podcast. Schmidt's Naturals. Smell good, do good. Okay, now back to the rest of our conversation. I want to transition to something that's a little bit harder. I was out in Australia just, a few months ago, and we were going to try to get together and hang out and maybe record this in person. And about a week before I left the States, your brother passed away. And do you mind if we talk a little bit about Zake?
No, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Before we get into it, can you just tell me a little bit about your brother?
Zake was my favorite person in the world other than Alba. Since he was born, it was like us against the world, because we went through all the same stuff together, shared all the same scars. Except I think like what we went through had a different effect on him, and he ended up retreating into himself more. And I think it was really hard for my mom to deal with. Like he would, if he, had a meltdown, he would like attack us or start destroying the house. He would switch so quickly. He had Asperger's as well. And my mom found it really quite hard to deal with him when he would flip out. And one day this man came into our lives and said that he would take Zake away to Germany and try and find someone who would help him with his issues. And that man ended up sexually abusing my brother as well. And when he came back to live with us again, he was even worse than ever before, and sort of just ended up spending every single day in front of his computer, never leaving the house. He was like a ghost. And I remember just sitting next to him for hours every day and just watching him play, and we didn't need to talk or anything. We just connected by just being next to each other, and it's quite heartbreaking. And then I ended up leaving home, and I remember the first time my mum called me that he had attempted to kill himself was when I was in LA. I was staying with my friend Zelda in her house, and I remember my mum calling me, and it was just so out of the blue, like to get a call from her while I was overseas. And she told me on the phone. I just remember breaking down and sobbing and spending the whole day just crying, and was so glad he was still okay. And I ended up going back to Australia and taking Alba with me and seeing him, and just like telling him how much I loved him and hugging him, like knowing that I could lose him. Like it's kind of like you don't think you can lose the people you love, like even though like that's a concept that makes sense, but in your head it just doesn't seem like that's possible. Anyway, that was the time that Zake said that Alba kind of saved him.
Wow.
They really connected, and she was really special to him. So after the first suicide attempt, Zake, while he was in the ambulance on the way to the hospital, he thought, you know what, life is like a game and I can choose how I want to play it. So after that, he turned his whole life around, and he got a job and made friends and got a girlfriend. And suddenly when I visited him, he was talking to me, and we realized like how much we were actually the same, like in so many ways I can't even list. And all of a sudden I had this brother that I'd always longed for, and it was just like the most beautiful thing. I can't explain like how happy it made me to see him. And we were just we were so close. Like we'd Skype all the time we were away from each other and call each other all the time, and he was the person that I felt that made me feel like I wasn't alone in the world, because I do feel like I'm quite a weird person, have like a lot of different quirks, and I don't know a lot of people with those quirks, but he had all of those quirks. He was just like me. And so after I moved into this new house, after we moved across the country, it was just 2 weeks being here, and I remember at that time Zeke was always trying to call me on my phone. And I remember thinking every time he called, like, oh, I just can't talk to him right now. I'm too busy. I just can't talk to him. And it was a few weeks of him calling. And then every time I'd try and call him, he'd miss my call. And it was like very back and forth. And then my brother texted me and said, Nirrimi, I need to talk to you. Answer your phone. And I was like, okay, I'll answer my phone. I talked to him, and Zeke said, hey, Nirrimi, I got this thing I really need to tell you, but I don't know how to tell you. And I was like, what is it? You know, are you in love with a man? Like, I was going through all these different things that it could possibly be. And we were laughing about it. And then finally he said, oh, actually, don't like freak out, but I'm feeling suicidal. And I remember my heart just instantly sinking and just instantly feeling sick and being like, just trying to talk him out of it, just in any way I could, just saying like, no, you're not really, like, you know, kind of being a bit in denial, because all those feelings rushed back of what it felt like that first time my mum called me and said that. And my brother told me on that phone call like how much I meant to him and stuff, but he also said at the same time that he wasn't feeling sad, and that like it didn't seem immediate, or maybe perhaps I was in denial and didn't want to think it was immediate. And then the next day I remember spending the whole day out, and then it got to nighttime and I thought, oh, I should call Zeke. And then I realized how late it was, and I said, okay, in the morning I'm going to call Zeke. And the next morning was the morning that my mum called me. And I remember it really clearly, because my mum doesn't call me very much. I usually call her, and I picked up my phone and I just saw her name on it, and instantly, it's like I just knew straight away. And when I answered her call, she was just sobbing, and I just held the phone away from me like as far as I could, and I was yelling at her, you know, don't tell me, I don't want to know, you know, like I knew that if I let her talk to me, then she might say what I was scared she would say.
And you wanted a few more moments.
Yeah, I needed more time in a world where I thought, in a world where he was still alive. And the only reason I put that phone back to my ear is I thought, she's going to tell me he's attempted, but he's back in the hospital and he's okay. But then when I pulled the phone to my ear, she said, Zeke has hung himself. And then like, it was just like my world just fell away, and it was like the most unbearable feeling that I've ever felt in my life. It is like nothing else. It is like so unbearable, like in the most literal sense of unbearable. Like there was like no way out of that feeling. Oh God, like I'm shaking just thinking. Yeah,
I'm
just
so
talking
sorry,
about it.
Nirrimi. I'm
No,
so
it's okay.
sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. It's just
How long has it been now?
I think it's been about 3 months, 2.5 months maybe. I don't know. I was keeping track for a while, but
What was the first week like?
Well, a couple of days after I heard the news, I actually flew to Townsville, where my family live, where my brother lives, to go for his funeral. And oh man, like even arriving at the airport, I could remember so clearly, like I could close my eyes and see my brother running up to me to hug me, because he's come so many times to that airport to get me. And then I went to our house and sat in his room, and you know, all of his clothes were around me, all of his stuff. And I just had so many flashbacks. And I remember my mum just coming in and saying, hey, you can grab whatever you like. And it just being so weird. Like, how weird is that? And I grabbed a T-shirt that he always used to wear when he was a kid that he still wore now, because he was just like that. He was just the most like, he would just dress like in the kind of things that nobody else would wear. He's just
That's amazing.
very much like not caring what anybody else thought of him. And so I remember just grabbing that shirt, and I remember smelling it, and it smelled so much like him. I just laid down on the bed and smelt it. And my mum brought in an iPad, and it had his last videos, his suicide videos on there.
Oh.
Like sort of his goodbye videos. And in it, he just said like how much he loved me, how I was the person he looked up to most in the world. And it was kind of like both really beautiful and really hard to hear that.
Yeah.
I don't know, almost like it would have been easier if I meant less to him or something. I don't know.
Yeah. It's also got to feel special to know that, like, he was in a really difficult mental space, and it had nothing to do with you, and like, you were not at fault at all. And
I mean, it's so easy to go back and think like, oh, if only I'd called him the day after. Like, how could I not? It seems so obvious now, but
there's no way
like,
you could have known.
There's no way. Like, so it was a really tough week, but I was surrounded by my family, and there was some kind of beauty in that. There's some kind of beauty in our whole family being together, and just knowing how much Zeke was loved. We had his funeral down at the park where he hung himself, actually, which seems like a little bit crazy, but we had his funeral there, and the park was full of people he'd affected. And this was so big because it was only like a couple of years that he had outside of his little bubble of like when he made the switch. So he had affected that many people. I remember walking down the street with him in our hometown, and just so many strangers coming up to him, hugging him, like their eyes lighting up when they saw him, because he was the kind of person who would talk to anybody. It didn't matter who they were. Like, he would just connect with everybody, and he was just had no judgment and was just so loving towards everybody. And he just obviously had a big impact on everyone, including me.
That's beautiful. And I think something really, really powerful that I've loved seeing, and I didn't expect you to do anything like this at all. Like, I think it would have been fully normal for you to grieve, or for even for me to not see anything from you on the internet. But you decided to take this pain, to take this heartbreak, and create some art out of it, and create some beauty out of it. Can you tell me about your recent project? This is one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen.
Okay, so the day that I found out Zeke had gone, a few hours after just crying and pacing, I went to my computer and I tried to find a photo of us together. I don't know why, I just became obsessed with this idea that, like, God, there must be this beautiful photo of us that I can just look at, you know? And I went through 3 external hard drives before I realized I don't have any beautiful photos of us together. And it just kind of like really broke my heart. I mean, I had iPhone selfies and stuff, but what I really wanted was just like one beautiful photo. And so after that, I thought, how many people out there don't have beautiful photos of people who they love, who they might not, you know, get a chance to get another photo with them. So I decided to put a shout out online and ask for anyone who needed photos with someone who they loved. And I ended up getting hundreds of emails and stories that were so long. Like, it took me days to read everybody's stories before I could even choose. And the stories, even like before I met anybody, before I shot anyone, the stories like themselves were quite healing for me, because I realized how many people have stories, how many people have tragedies and losses, and how much love there is in the world as well. And yeah, that was really powerful for me.
What were a few of your favorite stories that have come from this?
I think the last shoot I did, I don't know if it's just because it was the last shoot, it seemed really potent, but it was this mother and she had 3 little boys with her. And the youngest little boy was actually not hers by blood. He was the son of her best friend who had committed suicide, and she'd taken on her son as her own.
Wow.
And just seeing like the connection between her and the 3 boys was really beautiful.
That's powerful.
Yeah. Another was a father who had cancer, who had only maybe 6 months left to live. And just like seeing the way his kids looked at him was really, I don't know, it was really quite heartbreaking and beautiful to me. I don't know, there was just so many stories and so many people, and it was just every day I was shooting 2 to 3 times a day. I'd originally said I was only going to do 10 shoots, but I couldn't choose just 10. I ended up choosing almost 20 in the end.
Oh, wow. And
it was just like a whirlwind of just beautiful people and people like who were so grateful as well. But at the same time, I felt like, but this is like the least I can do, you know, like this is nothing compared to how much I want to give after losing Zeke. Like, I just want, I don't know. It just felt like in his absence, he left so much love or something in my heart, you know, like, I know that maybe that sounds a bit cliche, but I want to give so much more now that he's gone.
Yeah. Do you feel like it was healing for you to do that as well?
Yeah, definitely. It kind of also puts stuff in perspective because so I've lost my brother and he is so important to me, and that is a big thing. But, you know, people have lost their children and people have lost their whole families, or, you know, like there's always someone in a worse situation, and there's always something beautiful out of any bad situation as well. The people who came were just so full of hope, and that, yeah, it was just, I was really moved by it.
Is there something really significant that your brother taught you that you're going to hold on to, that you're going to remember for a long time?
My brother was really like passionate about being a really good person. Like that was kind of his biggest passion and goal in life, which I think is really beautiful. And he was constantly sharing with me the ways that he was growing. And probably the biggest thing that my brother sort of left me with is authenticity, is being yourself even when people don't like that. And that is obviously a big part of like who I am online and why what I do is so powerful. But I think I can definitely thank him a lot for making me unafraid to be myself. Another thing about when I found those photos is that I kind of realized that the reason I didn't have many photos with my brother is because perhaps like I'd thought of wanting one, but I thought, oh, my hair sucks today, or, oh, I really don't want a photo, I don't look good. Something really silly like that, really inconsequential. And yeah, I think Zake was never like that. Like he would be in a photo at any moment. He would do anything at any moment. He was just constantly open for whatever life threw at him. And now after he's left, I know I'm saying yes to more things. Like even, I don't know if I would have said yes to doing this podcast if it wasn't for Zake, because I would have cared too much about, I would sound so awkward. Oh God, I know I'm not good at talking. Like I'm better at writing, you know, like if it wasn't for him, now I'm just saying yes to so many more things I would have been scared to say yes to before, because I realized like, it isn't about like maybe me being awkward on here. It's more about what I have to say and the message I have to say. And it's more about just doing as much good as I can in the world. So I think that's really what he left me with.
That's incredible. You doing this doesn't really surprise me at all. You know, I mean, I've only known you for so long, but when we met, like you shared your life story and you've experienced so much pain in your life, but you've always been such a light through all of that. Where do you think that comes from?
Maybe out of a necessity. You know, like if I'd chosen any other path early on, then I'd probably be a lot more messed up than I am, probably be a lot more unhappy. I feel like I've had like a lot of unfortunate things cross my path since I was younger, and I've just continued to make the decision to get something good out of it all. Even like no matter what happens to me, I'm always looking for the silver lining in it.
Yeah.
Even when Zake died, like I remember it wasn't even that long before I was starting to think, okay, what good is in here, you know? Like what is good about this? And I suppose that's sort of where that idea was born from too, with the gift sessions.
Yeah.
Is I just thought, what good can I get out of this bad situation? Just helps me deal with life, I think.
Yeah, I mean, and you ended up alleviating pain in other people's lives because other people are going to have those photos. And I think it's just been beautiful seeing the way that you've been sharing the story online and seeing people responding, and I've been really touched by the way that you've been sharing these little moments, these little highlights of memories you've had. And I think you really are good at that. And it may not be easy for you to see because you're in the middle of it, but like not a lot of people actually have that ability to look for the light when they're in these dark places. Like I think anybody can do it, but it takes a lot of practice and it takes a lot of intentionality. And so I'm really impressed and inspired by your ability to do that, because you've really shined brightly through this whole process.
Yeah, that's really sweet. I think the same of you.
Thank you. Something I remember that you and I had talked about was this idea of how everybody has an amazing story and everybody's living a story. And your story has been one of ups and downs, and other people have stories that look different, but everybody has a powerful story. But what would you say to somebody who doesn't believe that they have a good story? Because that's what your life is you're telling your story and you're inviting and you're telling other people's stories. But what would you say to somebody caught up in this idea that they don't have one?
I would say just open your eyes, really. Like, I mean, there's so many things, just little tiny things throughout the day that are stories in themselves, you know, like everything is also so relative. Like, while like I might focus on my story as being like the really hard things that have happened, or the really amazing things like flying to New York City or losing my brother to suicide, there's so many of the little stories which might be just, you know, the sound of my daughter's voice when she sings, or, you know, the way that my partner will bring me tea without asking throughout the day, or, you know, like the weather, like the world, like the patterns in seashells, or, you know, the sound of the rain. Just, you know, like there's just stories, I think, in just being alive. Like, all you need to do is show up to life, and then all these stories are unfolding around you. And yeah, like other things, like, I mean, has someone ever been in love? Like, that's a story in itself. Like, whether that love is with their parent or with their child or with someone else, or, you know, heartbreak or sadness or loss or excitement or passion. Like, I think there's just, I think it's impossible to not have an interesting story, or to have not have stories unfolding constantly around you. You just have to sort of open your eyes to them, and
you just have to open your eyes. That's beautiful. On that note, I want to transition to this time where I ask these questions that I love to ask everybody who's on the show. And the first one is, how would you describe the kind of people that you most admire in the world?
I'd say excited by life, excited by what they love, not taking life too seriously, like being silly and just ready for adventures, and being able to see the light side of things, and also very honest. I like people who are not afraid to be who they are. And I think, like, while I say these, I'm definitely describing my brother and also amazing. Maybe a little bit myself, but I suppose that's the kind of people that I love, especially excitement. I think excitement is so important. I don't know. I just keep coming back to this thought lately about excitement.
I think that's a really beautiful way to approach grief, is choosing to focus on celebration, you know. And I think, I don't know. I think that's something you're doing well, is you're living life with excitement, even in the midst of all this. And it's almost out of respect to your brother that you're doing that. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I like to focus on not what's gone, but what's come of him leaving. Yeah. And I know that's what he would have wanted as well. And
you're doing that in a really real way, which is what's great. Like, you're not ignoring the pain. You're, you know, you talked about this off mic, but you were like, you know, this is good for me to talk about this. And you're choosing to face all of this head on. You're not hiding in optimism, because that's 0% good, but you're choosing to find the beauty in the brokenness. And I think that's something incredible.
And another beautiful thing I think is that this happened to me is I have this voice online where I can talk about these things in a very open way. So I'm giving a voice to people who have also lost people to suicide, and I've had people email me and say, thank you so much for sharing how deeply this affected you. I've been suicidal, and this has made me rethink whether I want to commit suicide, because now I know how much of an impact it'll have on the people who love me.
Wow. And it's probably helping other people realize that they're not alone out there.
Yeah. That's, I think, so much more powerful than it seems. Like, this stuff seems so simple, like with my blog and talking about even just like little things like, hey, it's hard to raise a toddler. You know, this stuff that seems so, I don't know, easy and little, but actually it's so big in the grand scheme, just of being honest and making people not feel alone.
On that note, you know, that's what you're creating right now. What are you consuming right now? Is there anything, especially in this time that you're in, that you're either reading or listening to or watching that's really helpful to you right now, that's offering you hope and encouragement?
I feel like I'm kind of in this weird like hibernation stage right now, where I'm not actively throwing myself into like one project, where I've got Alba full time. So I'm quite like, my days are quite full. So I am like, consuming a lot of stuff that's kind of inspiring me and getting me ready for like doing lots of big things. I think one book that's been really special to me has been Big Magic. Have you heard of it?
Oh my goodness, by Elizabeth Gilbert.
Yeah.
I went to her book signing in Nashville, and she read from it, and she answered questions, and it was maybe one of the most beautiful nights of my life. Like, it was incredible. I love that book.
I love that book so much. And a soundtrack, like music wise, I love listening to music. It's really inspiring for me. But one of my best friends is the singer in First Aid Kit, and they've been recording their newest record, and she sent me some demos, and I've been nonstop listening to them. So that's been just awesome.
That's because so good.
I mean, a couple of years ago, they were my favorite band, and I didn't know that Clara knew me. And then she, out of the blue, emailed me and said she'd been following my blog for 5 years, and now we talk every day. So it's pretty. And I went on a road trip with her across America and toured with them. So
I remember you telling me about that. That's really special. What's the support been like from your friends around the world? Because I know that you just have friends in all kinds of random places. Like randomly through our conversations, you would just like briefly mention somebody, and I'd be like, "Is that who I think that is?" Like they were all people I'd heard of, and what's that been like? People being all over the world, but I'm sure loving you all the same.
Yeah, it's kind of hard. Like I find myself being a little like envious of people who have friend groups who are all in the same town. Like I kind of don't understand that. Like how does that really, like, does that work? But I kind of think it's really special too, because I travel, and every time I go to a new city, I'm bound to have like one of my best friends there. So it's pretty cool to rock up and see them. And my friends are all the kind of people who understand that like maybe I won't talk to them for months, and that's okay. And we'll still, the next time we see each other, we'll still be like, we'll be just like we were the last time we saw each other. So I think that's the life of a traveler. I'm sure it's the same for you. Yeah, no, it's the same. Yeah. And it's been nice though, settling into Nashville, and it's a city full of travelers because everybody is a musician and everybody goes on tour. But then it's nice. So it's nice because everybody at home understands like, oh, you're going to be gone for a few months, but then you'll be back. So it's been really beautiful to find a community of people who we can all be in the same place. And I hope that you're able to find that in your new city sometime soon as well. I always do these things called plant love picnics, where I get everyone together to I'll put it on Facebook or on Instagram, and a bunch of people will get together and bring vegetarian food and just get to meet each other. I think community is so important. Like those picnics are some of the highlights of my life, just getting together with all these people and talking for hours until the sun sets and eating good food. And it's beautiful. Cool too, because beyond me, like all these other people get to meet each other. And I don't know. I love that sort of stuff. I love community stuff. I think it's so, so important. I think that's so special. I want to end on this question. Based on the ways that you've chosen to step out and live differently over the course of your life, what's one thing you'd encourage someone else to do in their own life? So, I don't know, offer one piece of advice to somebody out there who's in need of some words of wisdom from Nirrimi. Okay, so first, like a little bit of life advice, and this is like sort of about my brother's suicide, is to tell whoever you love that you love them. Like, I think that is so important. On my last phone call with my brother, it was just so like, I don't know, like so intense. I didn't say I love you at the end, and now I regret that. And he knew I loved him, so it's not about that. But I think just expressing your love and knowing, I mean, every time you see someone, you kind of assume like you're going to keep seeing them, that you're going to have so many more times to see them in the future. Or even like maybe you look at a tree and you're like, oh yeah, that's a tree. I've seen a tree before. I'm going to see lots of new trees. But every time you experience something, I think trying to experience it as though you're experiencing it for the last time, because in reality, that could be your last time, and just embracing every moment and just spreading love and being like authentic with how much you love. Not holding that back, because that's boring. Like if you really love somebody or something, I think you should just totally embrace that. It's way more fun. And creatively, I'd say not to take it too seriously, whatever you're doing. Like definitely have fun with it. It should feel fun. It should feel good. And doing it every day, like even if that's really little, like even if that means daydreaming about it for half an hour, or just like drawing some scribbles in your journal about whatever it is you're passionate about, or just talking to someone about it, just doing something every single day towards what you're passionate about. That's absolutely beautiful. Experience things like you're experiencing them for the last time. Tell people that you love them.
And then on the creative side, don't take things too seriously.
Oh, and one more.
Yes.
Don't be afraid to fail. Like, realize that failure is actually more powerful for you than success. I think a lot of people are scared to fail, but failing is actually awesome, and people don't care as much as you think they do about things.
That's great.
About you failing, about you making mistakes.
Yeah, because everybody else is paying attention to not making their own mistakes, so they're not paying enough attention to your mistakes.
Totally. Yes. That's why it doesn't matter that I do this podcast and sound a bit silly, because it's not what it's about. And it's more endearing, right?
Oh my gosh. If you go back and listen to my first episode, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, that is the definition of endearing. He's trying so hard.
That is awesome, though. That is awesome that you're human and that I'm human and that we're all human. It's way better if we're all perfect. It would be so utterly dreadful.
It'd be so dreadful. If you aren't already following Nirrimi online, you should absolutely follow her on Instagram at @fireandjoy. You can also read her blog at nirrimi.com. If you're new to Sounds Good, we would love for you to stick around. If you enjoyed this episode in particular, I think you'd also love my conversation with Brooke Shaden. She's a mutual friend of Nirrimi and I's, and she has a great approach to art. And another person that I actually met in Australia on this trip is an artist named Timba Smits, and he shares a powerful story that I won't spoil. You just got to listen to the episode. So you can find both of these episodes and more than 100 other episodes by searching for Sounds Good wherever you listen to podcasts. This podcast is created by me, Brandon Harvey, as a part of Good, a community that believes in the power of celebrating good news and becoming good news. Chad Michael Snavely and the team at CM Studio edit and mix the show. You can get lots of hopeful stories by following us everywhere at GoodCo. And every single week, we also send out a free email newsletter called the Good Newsletter. Inside, you'll find 5 good news stories from the past week, and we found that it's the perfect antidote to cynicism and apathy. You can subscribe for free at goodnewsletter.org. And on that note, that is a wrap for this week's episode. Go out and do some good this week, and we'll be back next week with another inspiring story from an incredible person. Sound good?